I wouldn't, before we get into the facts of what happened earlier this week to result in the death of the 2-year-old child here in Covington, would ask that all of our friends in the media be very cognizant of the fact that these stories that you all publish will never go away. And even if this child's name is not published, the parents' names, his deceased brother's name, that will never go away. It will always be out there somewhere, and he's never going to be able to escape Google. So I would ask you to be very intentional in what you publish and very cognizant of the fact that someday this 3-year-old boy is going to Google his name and his brother's name and his parents' names, and he's going to see all these articles and this news coverage over what happened to his brother when he was 3 years old. And would ask you to think before publishing his name and think before publishing any statements that he made during his CAC interviews. Those CAC interviews are certainly not intended for publication, and likewise, even though these arrest warrants are public record and you're certainly entitled to all the information that is in there, they are not composed for the purposes of publication. Those are not a press release, and so not everything that goes, every detail that goes into a warrant is not necessarily appropriate for public broadcast. So if you would keep the child in mind when you do your reporting, I think we would all appreciate it. I'm here today to discuss the death of 2-year-old Khalil Adams. I only say his name publicly because it's already been released by the Hamilton County Coroner's Office. And yesterday, the arrest of his parents, Selena Farrell and Tayshawn Adams. I think just for clarification purposes, Ms. Farrell neither one of the parents were initially arrested on the manslaughter charge that they now face. Ms. Farrell was arrested on a probation violation warrant after the U.S. Marshals located her hiding out in a hotel room in Florence. When they found Ms. Farrell, she was in the company of Mr. Adams and the other individual whose name has been published, but escapes me at the moment. He was also present in the hotel room with Ms. Farrell and Mr. Adams. That is why he is facing a hindering apprehension charge in Boone County. And just to be clear, those hindering apprehension charges that individual and Mr. Adams face are in Boone County. They are misdemeanor charges. They're not going to be prosecuted by my office. Those will be handled by the Boone County Attorney's Office. One note, though, the individual who was charged with hindering apprehension along with Mr. Adams was present in the apartment when Khalil was shot. However, he was not in the same room at the time of the shooting. So he was well aware of the situation that was going on, and we believe he was well aware of the fact that Ms. Farrell was wanted at the time that he was with her in the hotel room, because everyone in that apartment knew that she had a warrant out for her arrest. Ms. Farrell now faces charges of second-degree manslaughter. That is a Class C felony in Kentucky, punishable by 5 to 10 years in the state penitentiary. Possession of a handgun by convicted felon, also a Class C felony, punishable by 5 to 10 years. And abandoning a minor, which is a Class D felony, punishable by 1 to 5 years. Mr. Adams is charged with manslaughter second degree, again a Class C felony, punishable by 5 to 10 years. To my knowledge, Mr. Adams does not have a prior felony conviction, and he was still on scene when police arrived, hence the reason that he is not facing the additional charges that Ms. Farrell is. I think at this point, the whole purpose of this press conference was because I was getting inundated with press requests for interviews, and I really don't, when it's a topic that garners this much attention, I don't like to give separate interviews, because then one outlet gets information that another outlet doesn't give or get, and next thing you know, I have to do repeat interviews and things like that. So thank you all for coming today and obliging me knocking this out in one fell swoop. But at this point, I will answer questions as best I can, but keep in mind that prosecutors have ethical rules about what we are allowed to discuss and what we are not allowed to discuss. I can discuss anything that's in the public record, but beyond that, I am limited. So I apologize if I can't answer every question, but I will do my best to answer what I can.
Can you talk a little bit about the decision to charge in this case, obviously an accident with or would you would determine this an accident, I guess?
You know, I really don't like the term accident because I think accidents, in my mind, are unavoidable. And this certainly was not a situation that is, this was very much avoidable. This was not an unavoidable set of circumstances. This shooting death was caused by the fact that two adults left a loaded handgun with a round in the chamber within reach of a 3-year-old child that they did not supervise. So this is certainly not an indictment of guns or gun owners. This is about personal responsibility of two grown-ups, and that involves both the responsible gun ownership as well as the responsibility of raising your children and supervising your children, and certainly supervising them much more closely and carefully when there's something as dangerous as a loaded handgun in their vicinity.
Did they say why they had the handguns, especially since she was already a convicted felon and not allowed to have one? Did they give you any insight into that?
I believe they told detectives that it was for protection. That was pretty much the extent of it.
Selena, whenever you caught up with her, she had been on the run for a few days, actually. Was she in this hotel room the whole time? Any idea where she was at the time that she was?
I don't, that's part of the ongoing investigation. It's not in the public record. And quite frankly, I don't know the answer to that question yet. I'm sure the detectives are looking into it. They've, I know, recovered some security video footage from the hotel to document when she arrived and when she left and when she came back, things like that. But I haven't gotten, I've been in close contact with these detectives, needless to say, over the last few days, but we haven't gotten that down into the minute details at this point in the investigation.
What about conversations with her or any of the other people that have been arrested so far? Just kind of what are the things that they've said about the situation?
Other than the statements that are in the public record, I'm not allowed to talk about what defendants have said or refused to say to police. So there's really not much of their statements in the police or in the public record. I will just say the police have interviewed both of the parents.
The third individual, Jeremiah Thomas, what was his relationship to the parents? Is it a friend?
I guess friend, roommate, lack of a better term. I don't think that there is any blood relationship to my knowledge, but he was just an individual who was sleeping in a different bedroom. This apartment is essentially a one-bedroom apartment. The parents had a mattress on the floor in the living room of the apartment. They were sleeping on that, and the children were sleeping on a couch that was immediately adjacent to the mattress on the floor.
How many kids were there at the time? Was it
Two.
just the two? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you speak to, this was the first of 2 child shooting deaths in Covington within 2 days. Can you speak to that as far as, your role as prosecutor, but also just as a member of the Kane County community and your role?
Well, it's two very different situations, and I'm not going to go into a lot of the details about the shooting that resulted in the death of the 14-year-old child, except to say that neither of these deaths would have happened if children weren't in possession of guns. Obviously, very different set of circumstances, different ages of the children. Nevertheless, it goes to say that their parents need to do a lot better job of supervising their kids to make sure that we don't have kids with guns. It's
No
deadly.
other allegations of any other sort of abuse or anything like that?
I don't know. We have issued a grand jury subpoena for the cabinet records, which is the Cabinet for Families and Children, to see if there are any previous reports or anything like that. But right now, not to my knowledge, we haven't received the response to that subpoena yet.
What's next with just the investigation?
Well, the investigation is ongoing. To my knowledge, Mr. Adams is still in the Boone County Detention Center where he's dealing with that hindering prosecution charge. Ms. Farrell was arraigned this morning in Kenton District Court. She was scheduled for a preliminary hearing on the manslaughter, handgun by felon, and abandonment charges on January 31st at 1:30 in courtroom 1A of our courthouse. She also has a probation revocation arraignment on Monday, January the 29th, which is at 9 a.m. in courtroom 6A. That is simply to inform her of the alleged violations of her diversion agreement, and the judge will set a hearing on those violations.
I'm sorry if I missed this, but just last question related to the gun that was used in this case. You know when they got that, how long they'd had it, that type of thing?
I don't know the date. I know that the gun was purchased by Ms. Farrell. I believe it, because it was purchased from a federally licensed dealer who would have done a background check on her, I am assuming that it was purchased before she pled guilty to a felony, because obviously if it was after, it should have flagged her, and I trust that when a federally licensed dealer sells a gun, they're pretty efficient in their background checks, and that shouldn't have been sold. So I'm assuming it was before she pled guilty.
And you mentioned that this was avoidable. Do you think that Kentucky's current gun storage laws are adequate, or?
Yes, I mean, the bottom line is they're adequate. We've got charges on them. It's not the law that's the problem, it's the parenting. This, like I said, was very much avoidable. They could have secured the weapon. There's a number of different ways to secure a weapon. Obviously, you can lock it up in a safe or something like that, but you can also make it so that a 3-year-old can't operate the gun in a number of different ways, including taking the bullets out of the chamber. So that something as simple as unloading the gun could have prevented this tragedy. And it doesn't take much pressure to pull the trigger of a gun. It does take quite a considerable amount of pressure to rack the slide of a gun, or otherwise, move a bullet from the magazine into the chamber. It takes a lot more strength than just pulling the trigger. I think a trigger pull on a Glock handgun such as this is only about 5 pounds, which is not much at all.
Was the other child hurt in pulling the trigger, or is the other child okay?
No serious physical injury whatsoever.
Were there any kind of gun locks or safes or anything in the house that you guys found?
Not to my knowledge.
And did she say why she took off? I mean, was there any,
I believe if you read her arrest warrant, it reflects her reasoning, and that she knew her child was going to die, so she wanted to be free for the funeral, which the irony of that statement is she had a probation violation on a 1 to 3 year Class D felony, which is our lowest level Class D felony in Kentucky. It's not even punishable by a full 5 years. And chances are, if she had gone to, first of all, the police officers who arrived on the scene and treated the child and loaded the child up to go to the hospital, they would have had no idea that she would have had that warrant at the time. Now, eventually they would have found it, I'm sure, and served it because it's a court order. But she would have been in and out of the jail probably in a matter of hours, no later than no later than the next day. This was on a Monday, so no later than the next business day, I believe she probably would have been released based upon how our justice system works here in Kentucky. And low-level offenders like that are not held in jail even for probation revocations in most circumstances. So if she'd have just been booked through, making the child's funeral would not have been an issue.
And early on in the investigation, you guys mentioned that Adams, the father, was cooperating with police, but then you said later he was with Farrell at the hotel when she was found. Did he continue to cooperate with you guys, or?
I'm not sure that there was a whole lot of need for cooperation from that point on. I mean, obviously, it was hindering the police investigation by him assisting her in hiding in a hotel room, and again, I don't want to get too far into the details, but he was assisting her in hiding from police, and that hindered the apprehension. Part of the investigation, in addition to what the police detectives have been doing, is my office staff's been researching Kentucky law and precedent on this, and there is no reported case law in Kentucky on charging a parent who failed to secure a loaded handgun from a 3-year-old child. It just, that we can find, hasn't happened before. So if there has been a similar case, it doesn't come up on a Google search, it doesn't come up on a Westlaw search, which probably means it was a not guilty verdict. So this is a novel charge, but at the same time, I think by all means that we have enough evidence to sustain a conviction. And likewise, when I present this case to the grand jury, I intend to present them every level of homicide, from reckless homicide to manslaughter second degree to wanton murder, and let the grand jury decide what they think this is. So there's always a possibility the charge could go up at the grand jury level, or also go down. And just so you're clear, manslaughter first degree under Kentucky law just doesn't apply to the factual situation. So I believe the options would be wanton murder, manslaughter second, or reckless homicide.
I want to go just real quick. I know that you didn't want to talk on this, but just the 17-year-old suspect in the other shooting that we had this week, do you know, have they been moved out of
It has, no. They've just been arraigned, and the next hearing, I don't even know when the next hearing was scheduled, but they don't do transfer hearings at arraignment.
Okay.
I think you mentioned this at the beginning. Thomas, I know Farrell and Adams are in Kenton County Jail. Where is Thomas currently?
He was booked into the Boone County Detention Center. I think he has since either bonded out or been administratively released. I don't believe he's still incarcerated.
I guess I didn't see that warrant where she said she ran because she didn't want to miss the funeral as the child was injured.
Did you not get it?
I guess I didn't get to that part yet.
Okay.
So she didn't want to miss I mean, that sounds like you said, premature. The child's still injured and you're running because you don't want to miss the funeral. That sounds.
Child was still alive.
That's maybe a first.
Brian, I've got lots of strong feelings about it, but I'm not allowed to talk about my feelings in a press conference because of the prosecutor ethics rules, so we'll just see how a jury feels. What's that? My pleasure. Okay. As always, if anything comes up that you forgot to ask today, shoot me an email. I'm hoping to get rid of you all. No offense. But I got another trial to get ready for this weekend, so I'm hoping to put this case to rest for a little while. Before we leave, I just want to thank Chief Brian Valenti from the Covington Police Department for coming down, and the other two gentlemen in the suit jackets next to him are Detectives Jim Lindeman and Adam Yule, who are the lead investigators on the case, along with Captain Jen Rudolph, who's the head of the Crime Bureau in Covington, and Assistant Chief Matt Winship. It's been a tough week for all of us, I think. It's really some ugly factual situations we're dealing with, but obviously Khalil could use your prayers for his afterlife, his older brother. I can't imagine what life would be like for him going forward. He could use your prayers. The police officers that did CPR on this 2-year-old little boy, and the paramedics who worked on him and took him to Children's, and all the Children's ER staff. I think all those first responders could use your prayers as well, because I've seen the body cam video, and it's pretty tough to stomach. So keep those folks in mind. Thank you all.
Real quick,
Oh.
did the father end up going to Children's, or was Khalil there by himself?
In all fairness, the father was taken in for questioning, so for him, going to Children's was not an option. However, I think at the time that all the chaos of the scene was first happening, the police officers thought that the mother she was not there when police arrived. When we review the body cam video, she's nowhere there. But as police first began the investigation, I think they all assumed, well, she must have gone with the ambulance because she's not here. And then, lo and behold, as they started the investigation, it turns out that she fled the scene in a vehicle before police arrived, after the 911 call, but before police arrived. Okay?
Thank you.
Great, thank you all.
Thanks.